Hello everyone, I am extremely excited to introduce you to the next episode of Who Is, and in this episode we're going to talk about cadiaN, a guy that I know a lot of you guys either love, hate, or somewhere in between. He's one of the most interesting characters we have within the Counter-Strike scene, and a character I've come to like more and more as his career has developed. In this video, we're going to walk through cadiaN from his very early stages in Counter-Strike. I was his teammates. I had the honor of, kicking him from a couple of my teams to his trip to America, coming back from America, and all of a sudden, now being one of the best in-game leaders in the world, playing on one of the best teams in the world, if not the best in Heroic right now, which is quite significant. So, the story about cadiaN, the who is about cadiaN, even if you don't know cadiaN, I am quite sure that you're going to find this video very interesting. One of the sickest comeback stories of Counter-Strike we have to offer. So sit down, grab some popcorn, grab a coffee, I don't care. Be ready for this one because it's going to be big. Hey guys, I am super sorry to interrupt you watching the video, but I gotta tell you about this. I have created my own CSGO inspired watch together with a Danish partner. It is a watch designed and inspired by me, and it looks like this. There's only 200 of these watches. It'll be limited, and each watch will have a number on the back case where you can see what number you got out of the 200 if you were to buy it. And the back case has Mirage integrated as well. It's a CSGO inspired watch, it's a collectible, and I would argue the best Christmas gift anyone could ask for if you're into CSGO. Check out the link below the video. As said, limited edition, it'll be sold out quickly. I would argue that most of you guys know who cadiaN is. I would argue that most of you have seen some of his clips where he's breaking the chair after winning a game, or some of his smirk interviews where he's sometimes, being a little bit provocative. As said, he's a great character within the Counter-Strike scene, and I'm sure most of you guys have seen him before somewhere. But for good reason, let's just quickly walk through who is cadiaN, where is he from. cadiaN is a Danish Counter-Strike player who's been around since 2011-ish. He played Counter-Strike Source, then coming into Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Took a little bit of time before he had a breakthrough and before he was classified, I guess, as a semi-pro player. But he's been around for a very long time. He's very experienced, and he's a player that I would argue that has always been slightly underrated, but we'll get back to that. He's from Denmark, he's 27 years of age, and he just had his breakthrough with this current iteration of Heroic, winning his first international LAN event. But for those of you who don't know, cadiaN, great character, fun character, gives spicy interviews. Some hate him, some like him, some are in between. And I guess we all remember the clip where he breaks the chair and constantly, goes crazy, can't control his emotions, and really lives and breathes Counter-Strike. I think that's what we will remember cadiaN for whenever he retires one day. But yes, Danish Counter-Strike player, 27 years of age, been around for a long time, and a guy that we're going to talk more about. So let's get into the nitty-gritty when it comes to cadiaN. His team history and how he went from being an unwanted character within Danish Counter-Strike to now one of the ones that you, if you're a young Counter-Strike player, you look up towards him. If you're one of those players out there not able to find the right team for you, you're praying and crossing your fingers that one day cadiaN will call you and implement him into his system. All started out in 2011, 2012. He was playing Counter-Strike Source. I basically grew up with cadiaN with the same age. He was never considered to be a big talent in Counter-Strike Source, I would argue. Same could be said the first couple of years in CSGO. He was in teams like Sapso, didn't really break through. He then got a massive chance, I remember, in Mousesports, where he played one major with Mousesports back then. One of the first players to actually go and work out on an international team. He was only there for, I believe, 3 or 4 months before he got cut. Wasn't a great success from him. Then he found himself in many years, from 2014 to 2016, and in all these different teams. He was in Trick, he was in Recent Gaming, he was in the second tier of Danish Counter-Strike. He was a good player, I would argue. He was a decent player. Got his chances. I remember playing with him in Copenhagen Wolves at the major as well, the very first, or one of the first CSGO majors out there. And by no means were cadiaN a bad player. He was just not a difference maker. I remember in Copenhagen Wolves, I had the honor of having to tell him that he unfortunately got cut from the team. I remember back then I was thinking to myself that, cadiaN, he's not a bad player, he's not a bad person by no means, but he doesn't add any X factor. He's not a guy making the difference on the server. The problem for cadiaN back then was that he was not good enough with the AWP to take over any lead AWP roles within any of the Danish teams. So he was playing the rifle role, and cadiaN with a rifle today, he's decent, but he's not a player that makes the difference, and that was the same thing back then. So he got cut from Copenhagen Wolves, he got cut at some point from Recent Gaming, he was left out of SK Gaming as well. Again, fun fact, I cut him from Copenhagen Wolves, and then myself was in Dignitas, I got cut from Dignitas, and I was signed to SK Gaming. They bought me out of my contract, and the guy I had to replace was cadiaN. So I came in as the new guy, and cadiaN was put on the bench. I was a little bit sad back then about not playing with him. That would have been fun to reunite with him. He was starting to get better, but then again, he was found, you know, not to be good enough for what was the third best Danish team at the time. That's sort of like the context of cadiaN. Are you also super tired of people trying to scam you all the time whenever you're trying to sell or buy a new knife? Then I'd advise you to head over to cadiaN. cadiaN is a legit German registered company, a marketplace that on average has skins for sale 30% cheaper than on the Steam market. I use cadiaN, and I do it because I don't want to worry about people scamming me. To hell with scammers. From that point and onwards, he was considering, as far as I'm aware, to stop playing Counter-Strike. He was doing some expert job, he was doing some commentating jobs on Danish TV and even on international broadcast as well, something he did very well. As you know, cadiaN, he's great in interviews, he's a great speaker, and I thought honestly back then that was it. I thought his career was over. I thought, okay, listen, he gave it a go and he was never good enough to make a breakthrough. That was sort of like the end of cadiaN at the time. He then went to Rogue, and this is where everything changed. He took the chance and he made the commitment to go from European Counter-Strike when nobody really wanted to gamble on cadiaN, went to Rogue, and he found success with an American team that at the time weren't good at all. Like, he went into Rogue, he did a good job, he was leading, he was in charge, he was playing the AWP again, and he found success in Rogue and sort of cemented himself as a player that would never give up. Right? The fact that you're willing to go from Europe, go from all your friends, go from your life, move to America in a team like Rogue, have any bright future ahead of them. Sure, he was living in Las Vegas and it was a great, you know, experience, but must not have been the nicest stay over there. I remember I got an offer from the time being from the Rogue team as well. I'd been in Team Liquid, and even in Liquid, you know, who at the time were one of the biggest organizations in the world. I didn't feel that it was always worth it to be in America, to be away from friends, family and everything. But cadiaN didn't give a damn. He went to Rogue, he found success, he qualified them for the major, and that was sort of like his breakthrough. That was the breakthrough he's been fighting for such a long time. I remember him starting to cry after Rogue qualified for the major, and you could just sense how much it meant to him. I was honestly proud of him for not giving up, but again, I was thinking to myself, sure, great results, and again, you're not going to be good enough to be on a top 1, top 2, top 3 team in Denmark at the time. He came back from Rogue and he got a shot in North, who at the time were the second, third best Danish team, who at the time was supposed to be a challenger to Astralis, who at the time had budgets that was very, very fun to work with. I remember a lot of the players within North were paid an awful lot of money compared to how mediocre they were performing, and that was an ongoing joke in Denmark. cadiaN was brought in to try to make up with that, you know, try to change the culture a little bit, see if he could be the guy, you know, making the same success out of North as he did in Rogue. And once again, cadiaN fell back. Once again, he couldn't quite get the team to buy on board to his project. He couldn't quite find the success. It wasn't that his stay in North was a disaster by no means. They were just not performing better from when he came into when he once again was cut off North. And I thought again, okay, I saw what you did in Rogue. Well done. You got another chance coming back to North. It didn't work out, and at the time being, I thought, okay, well, if it didn't work out this time around, when are you gonna give up? All right, when are you going to give up? But cadiaN, he never gave up. The next team he would join was Heroic, and I don't know what the hell happened. And I would love to interview cadiaN at some point. I would love to do a podcast episode with him, and I'm gonna ask him if he's willing to do it. But in Heroic, he found himself. He found a team that believed in his philosophies. I would argue as well, he found a team that was willing to listen to all the experience he's had, right? From being the outcast in Danish Counter-Strike, from being the guy who moved to America, from being the guy who then found success, came back and failed within North, and he took all those learnings into Heroic, and he established a team, he established an environment, and he established a core of players that would go on and perform at a very high level. The beginning was shaky for Heroic. It wasn't like they were a top 5 team from the get-go, but over time you could see how good they were. Then COVID hit, right? We had the whole online period where Heroic and Gambit in particular, they were the best 2 teams in the world during the vast majority of the COVID period. I remember Big in the beginning They were the best team. Then Heroic came in, then Gambit came in, and it was like Gambit and Heroic constantly fighting back. I remember some of these online finals during the COVID times where Heroic played some of the most beautiful Counter-Strike I've ever seen, and same could be said about Gambit, now known as Cloud9. So they had that whole rivalry, and that was sort of like the breakthrough for cadiaN, right? He found himself in Heroic. Not a team that on paper was supposed to be a top 5 team, or let alone a top 1 or top 2 team in the world, but he made the most out of the COVID period. When everyone else were not motivated, when everyone was sitting at home, you know, Dupree, Nico, Simple, all these guys who tried it all. They won it all. They've been at the biggest arenas, they've been at the majors, they tried it all. They got demotivated. It's not fun to play Counter-Strike online. It's not fun to be in this COVID period. But for cadiaN, that was an opportunity for him to break through. That was an opportunity for him to say, okay, listen, we got a year and a half where COVID is going to destroy everything. While you're chilling, while you're not playing deathmatch as you used to, I'm going to grind the shit out of this team and make sure that I am going to be one of those players who's coming out of COVID as a guy who can lead one of the best teams in the world. And that's exactly what he did. Again, a truly underrated testament to his work ethic, and what he did with Heroic was that he formed and he established that team during COVID. And when they came out, sure, you can argue that Heroic didn't have the experience on LAN. It took some time before they broke through, but look at them now, right? The PGL Stockholm Major in the semi-final. Then the quarterfinal at the Antwerp Major, again, 2 back-to-back playoff, and then a third one in Rio, where they managed to go all the way to the finals, and they were even the favorites in the finals against outsiders. Had a rough game, didn't win it, fair enough, but you have 3 back-to-back playoffs at the Major. You go into Blast Royal Arena at home soil with no Astralis, and you win your first LAN title. So all this talk about cadiaN, Heroic being onliners, couldn't replicate their performances on LAN. Sure, there was something to be said about that. They didn't have the experience. They were crumbling from time to time. But as with cadiaN and his career, every single time they faced adversity, every single time they couldn't quite get over the finish mark, they learned, they got experience, and they improved. Obviously, adding Schuss to that lineup did a tremendous amount of work. And adding Yabi instead of Full Refresh as well, they did a tremendous amount of improvement to the ceiling of Heroic. By no means were Refresh a bad player. I think he was a great fit within Heroic, but for them to take the step of just being a top 5, top 6 team to be a team that can contend to be the best in the world, I have no doubt that Yabi were the right placement. Again, I want to credit that to cadiaN. He's playing with Stown. He has his right hand in Stown, but cadiaN is the leader. He is the soul of this team, and once you look back at the history with Heroic and you look back at the history with cadiaN, you must argue that it is one of the sickest comebacks of all time. From being a player that for the vast majority of 6 years were an outcast, were a player that, yeah, sure, you're fine, you could be the stand-in, yeah, we can give you a contract in USNA on a shit team. About that, right? He fought back, he gained experience, he fought back, he gained experience, and all of a sudden now we all look towards cadiaN, and we must admit, myself included, he is one of the best in-game leaders in the world. He is one of the most inspiring players out there that you potentially can watch. And if I'm a young gun right now thinking that my career is not going the way I wanted it to, if I'm a guy that is playing on a top 30 team, top 35 team, and I can't really break through, keep mother effing grinding. Look towards what cadiaN did. Once you stop believing, it's done for, right? You gotta be there 100%. It feels like cadiaN never stopped believing. It feels like he was willing to sacrifice everything to get where he is right now, and I absolutely love that story. The history of cadiaN, the comeback, going to America, coming back to Denmark, failing, and then still trying, still getting it to work with Heroic, where today, right now, as I'm recording this video, you can make an argument for Heroic being the best team in the world and cadiaN being one of the best in-game leaders in the world. I find that truly inspiring. Chapeau cadiaN, well done. Keep motherfucking going, buddy. I absolutely love it. I hope that gave you guys an idea of what cadiaN is, what kind of person he is, what kind of capacity he is, what kind of warrior he in some sense is, a guy that would just never give up. I absolutely love the story, and you're more than welcome to look into it, dive into it, and look at cadiaN, look at some of the pictures from back in the days, look at some of his statistics as well, as an individual player as well. I didn't praise that in the little history walkthrough of cadiaN. He's also improved quite significantly. He's not just a great in-game leader that contributes like that. He's a player that sometimes now makes the difference on the server, especially with the AWP. We saw it during COVID. We've even seen it at certain occasions at LAN events as well. The big critique for me and the feeling I had when I was playing with him and against him back then, no doubt I was a significantly better player than cadiaN, today, vice versa. The fact that I didn't feel back then that he could make the difference on the server, that was absolutely true. I think everyone would agree to that he was just not good enough back then. But as said, he fought back, and now he's currently in a shape, in a form where cadiaN is making the difference, not only as an in-game leader, but also as an individual player, which is another cool little attribute to what cadiaN is all about. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think his inspiration and his story is inspirational to a point where I'm almost like, fuck me, it makes me so happy. You know, you can hate cadiaN, you can love cadiaN, you can think that he's sometimes too much in his interviews, but one thing you can't discredit cadiaN for is the fact that he wears the emotions on his sleeves. He's a guy that is giving his 100% to Counter-Strike, and whether you like him or not, whether you want to discuss the whole cheating scandal and the hunting scandal, etc., I can understand why that may be. But when you just look at his career isolated as a Counter-Strike player, I find it truly, truly inspirational. As said, cadiaN, you've done a fantastic job. To those of you who didn't know cadiaN, I hope you get a better idea of where he's from now, what he's been able to go through, and why he perhaps sounds like a guy who's very proud of himself. I think he should be, I think he deserves it, and I think you guys deserve to clap off cadiaN whenever he's doing well as well. I think it's one of those stories that we all could benefit from learning and sometimes look into to gather a little inspiration, whether that is in your Counter-Strike career, in your work life, in your personal relationship-wise. I guess the moral of the story is, never give up. Unless you give up, then you probably should give up.